Cindy and I are delighted to be with you today, and hopefully the rain will hold off. It'll probably just be a little sprinkle, probably won't be anything too bad. So.
All right.
But, you know, we've had such a wonderful time traveling around the state of Iowa, because the important thing here, with all the little towns and villages, you have a chance to actually meet people face to face. They get to actually find out who you are, not who the media says you are, but who you actually are. And that's such an important part of who we are as a nation, because this nation was designed of, for, and by the people. And the government is supposed to be there simply to facilitate life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not to insinuate itself into every aspect of our lives and to control who we are. And that's one of the reasons that I was so vehemently opposed to Obamacare, because the government comes along and says, we don't care what you the people think. This is what we're doing, and if you don't like it, tough. Well, you know, that's not America. And if we accept that kind of reasoning, what else won't we accept? And it will fundamentally change who we are as a nation. And we have to be smart enough to recognize when the progressive movement insinuates itself into the very principles of freedom that we have in this country. It's another reason also that I so vehemently oppose the concept of political correctness, because there were so many people who gave their lives so that we could be free, we could express ourselves the way we wanted to. And to have people come along and say, no, you may not say this. You know, I would rather, even if I don't like what they're saying, I would rather them be able to say it, so at least I know where they're coming from. If you know how you have people hiding what their feelings are, how are you ever going to be able to make progress as intelligent people? How can you have an open conversation if people can't actually say what they mean? And, you know, it all goes back to those who are trying to control everything. And they think that they know better than the people. I was talking to some of the architects of Obamacare last week. And I said, you know, I want something that the people actually want. They said, no, 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 no. They said, the people actually want this. They said, you can't go by the polls. You can't tell by anything by the polls. But we know that this is what the people actually want. Well, you see, there are a political class that believes that they know what you want, even if it's not what you want, because you just haven't come to their way of thinking yet. And when you do, then you'll know what you want. But it's such stupid thinking, and it has nothing to do with who we are as Americans. Well, you know, I kind of learned how not to think like the rest of the group. I think because of my mother. My mother was very different than the people around her. You know, she grew up in rural Tennessee, was one of 24 children, never really had a place to lay her head. She would just shuffle from home to home, tried to cobble together as much education as she could, because there was something in her that knew that education was important. And she managed to get up to a third-grade education before she got married at age 13 in an attempt to escape that horrible environment. And wound up moving to Detroit, and years later discovered that her husband was a bigamist. Well, there she was, trying to raise 2 young sons all by herself. And, you know, her friends were always saying, you know, you can get this benefit and this benefit. You don't have to work, just sit home and collect stuff. She just couldn't stand the idea of being dependent on other people. So she would work. She would go out. She would leave the house at 5 o'clock in the morning. And she would get back after midnight, going from job to job to job, cleaning toilets, scrubbing floors, doing whatever she needed to do, because she just didn't want somebody else to be telling her what she had to do. And with all the things that happened in her life, she never felt sorry for herself. And that was a good thing. The problem is she never felt sorry for us either. So there was never anything that we could say that would make her feel sorry for us. You know, she would just say, "Do you have a brain?" And if the answer to that was yes, then you could have thought your way out of it. And that was such an important concept to get across to us. And that was something that was inculcated into my life and my brother's life. Now, we weren't necessarily enamored of the way she tried to instill values into us, like turning off the TV set. We thought that was child abuse. And making us read books. We had to read 2 books apiece every single week from the Detroit Public Libraries and submit to her written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And you know, she would put little check marks and highlights and stuff like that. And I was not enthusiastic at all. But you know, an interesting thing happened as I started reading those books, and particularly as I started reading about people of accomplishment from all walks of life, and how they had accomplished what they did. It dawned on me that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you. It's not somebody else. It doesn't matter what somebody else said. And that had a profound effect on me. And I got to the place where I just started reading everything I could get my hands on. And in the space of a year and a half, I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class, much to the consternation of all the students who used to laugh and call me dummy, who were now coming to me saying, Benny, how do you work this problem? And I'd say, sit at my feet while I instruct you. I was perhaps a little obnoxious, but it sure felt good to say that to those turkeys. But you know, the fact of the matter is, you know, these brains that we have are absolutely amazing. And, you know, I get a little irritated with the people who are always trying to denigrate human beings. If you have a normal brain, you are capable of almost anything. It has billions and billions of neurons, hundreds of billions of interconnections. It remembers everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever heard, can process more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. You can't overload it. Don't listen to those people saying, don't learn this, you'll overload your brain. You can't overload the human brain. If you learn 1 new fact every second, it would take you more than 3 million years to challenge the capacity of your brain. So it is simply not a problem. And with brains like that, we have the ability to solve our problems. We don't need a bunch of bureaucratic politicians to solve our problems. We can solve our own problems. And I get so sick of people saying, but you don't have any political experience. You haven't been elected to this office or that office. Like those people have solved their problems. You know, I mean, this is just, I mean, I could see it if they were all wise and were doing things that were right. But that's silliness. And, you know, as a neuroscientist, I can tell you the thing that is most important is being able to think. Being able to look at the facts and to utilize those facts to make appropriate decisions. And the decisions that we have to make right now are absolutely monumental. Now, the good thing is we have a ton of incredibly bright people to help us solve these problems. There are those who think that only the president can solve your problems. That is absolutely a bunch of crap. You know, what you need, though, is a president who is smart enough to surround himself with the right kinds of people who can help solve problems. You know, in the book of Proverbs, chapter 11, verse 14, it says, in the multitude of counselors is safety. And that was written by the wisest man who ever lived. So these people who think that they know everything are sadly mistaken. And again, it comes back to the whole premise of a country that is of, for, and by the people. Not of, for, and by a political class or any other group. It is for all of us, and it's incumbent upon us to begin to exercise our intellect when we select our leaders. We should not be sheeple who simply listen to the pundits and listen to people who think that they know everything, because if you go and look at their records, you will see that they know almost nothing. And it's really the common sense that will get us where we need to go. You know, you look at the problems that we face right now. Common sense. You look at our fiscal problems. You hear about the $18.4 trillion national debt. And that is a lot of money, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you tried to pay back $18 trillion at a rate of $10 million a day, it would take you more than 5,000 years. And we're putting that on the backs of our young people. Thomas Jefferson said it's immoral to pass debt on to the next generation. If we could transport him back here today, and he could see what we were doing, he would probably stroke out immediately. I mean, it is beyond belief what we are doing. And our leaders think that they have scored a victory when the debt doesn't go up as much this quarter as it did the last quarter. I mean, that is just such asinine and backward thinking. We have to get it under control. But you know what? The national debt, that's not our biggest problem. It is the fiscal gap that is our biggest problem. When you look, and when you go home today, please, everybody, read about the fiscal gap. That is the unfunded liabilities that we owe. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, governmental programs, Cabinet Department programs going forward versus the amount of money we expect to receive in revenues from taxes and other sources. Now, if you run a business or a household, you know that those numbers should be pretty identical. What's going in, what's coming out. When it isn't, there's a gap. It's called a fiscal gap. You bring it up to today's dollars. It's a fiscal gap for our country right now sits at $211 trillion. Now that's a staggering number. And the only reason that we're still standing as a nation is because we can print money. And we're not doing that in a responsible way. We decoupled our dollar from the gold standard in 1971. This is all done on our good name, faith, and credit, which may not be there for very much longer at the rate we're going. And the ability to print money goes to the reserve currency, which we have been for quite a number of years. It usually goes with the #1 economy in the world. We have been that since the 1870s until last year when China passed us up. Would they like to be the reserve currency? They would, but they're not quite able to handle that financial responsibility right now, which is lucky for us. But that day may come, and we have a grace period, and we have to change our ways. And we're doing exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. Instead of shrinking that debt, we are inviting people in here from other places and rewarding them with all kinds of benefits and goodies. And we are giving people Obama phones. And we're encouraging people to get on food stamps. And we're telling everybody the government owes you this and the government owes you that. All that is doing is accelerating our financial collapse.